Good, okay.
So that wasn't just me.
No, the whole
No.
thing, it just kind of, I thought, we're just gonna blame it on the thunderstorm.
I guess, yeah.
Poor Alex.
I'm
Alright.
just so glad that it didn't happen during one of our crazy hearings. I'm just so glad that it wasn't something where we had like 100 attendees.
Well, we were almost wrapping up. We were just gonna just give a little bit of an update. Oh, Alex is frozen. There, you were frozen for a little bit, Alex. I think she's frozen
Yep, my
again.
internet's not
I think you
great
should
today. I'm
probably
gonna make-
turn off your video at least for, and that helps a little bit.
Okay, and Natasha, I'm gonna make you co-host
You can make
just
me
in
co-host.
case I get booted.
And we have 4 minutes and then I'm gonna turn it off. And I'm just kidding. I'm the wrong person to give
Well-
it to. I'm like, we gotta get this meeting going.
Well, you know what? We have Oscar and Ed. Well, I thought I just saw Ed. Oh, no,
Yeah, Ed's here and Heidi is
excuse me.
here.
We have two Eds. Ed Cosgrove is on the housing development, but then the other people who are on it are not here. Oh, gee.
Well, we'll see. We'll wait 1 more minute and then we can just, you can see the recording.
Yeah, well, yes, I mean, I can present, and Oscar is here for the zoning subgroup. And for capacity building, of course, you're here, Natasha. And for housing development, Helen is here. So a report can be made. And Ed Cosgrove is here for housing development. So we can continue with making these
Sure.
reports.
So I was just gonna remind everyone who was in which group. So zoning is Oscar Mertz, Jean McKnight, and Ed Scheidler. And then capacity building, oh, here comes Emily also. Is myself, Michael O'Brien, Carol Pachetti, is that how you say her last name? And myself, and then housing development and preservation is Helen Gregory, Rhonda Spector, Emily Cooper, and Ed Cosgrove. And while we wait for the rest of the group to see who joins us, I will say that our group has been a little slow in starting, but that we just created, we're meeting at the end of the month because next week is school vacation week. And some of the initial discussions about capacity that were discussed were regarding racial and economic diversity and equity, capacity of town resources, school capacity and communication to town, transportation and traffic options and capacity, inventory of town-owned land, and housing goals and milestones. So we're gonna, while we meet, until we meet, we're gonna start kind of dividing and conquering all these things to try to get a little dig deeper in some of them. And then we're meeting at the end of the month. So we're a little behind, but we're gonna catch up. And so I don't know if Oscar or Jean, if you wanted to give an update on the zoning group.
Well, I'll start, and please, Oscar, and if Ed Scheidler appears, they can add. But we did have our first meeting, and that was on March 22nd. And we had a rather open and vague agenda of reviewing existing zoning for residential, multifamily, and mixed-use housing. And I had prepared for a League of Women Voters Forum that occurred last October, a big chart, that had all the zoning districts and the rules for those districts. And so I provided copies of those hard copies to Oscar and Ed, and we went over really all the zoning we have in our town now, so that the three of us really understand it. That spreadsheet is, I believe, available on our website as an attachment to the draft, to the long document, to the, what would you call it, the draft housing plan, Karen, that has been circulated to our membership. Yeah, it's an attachment.
Yes.
I'm working with Alex to get it put on as a separate document, so it's a 4-page spreadsheet. Then we focused on the MBTA communities, Department of Housing and Community Development draft guidelines. as they apply to Needham. And so, you know, we had copies of the draft guidelines and we read them and talked about the issues that don't seem quite right. That and our, you know, at the end of the month, our town responded to the draft guidelines. And at our next meeting, we're going to discuss that response. So our next meeting, because, you know, we really did, you know, we thought an important role of the zoning subgroup is to focus on this MBTA Communities Act and these guidelines, because that is right now, and it's something the town is facing. So at our next meeting is April 19th. And we met in person in the Charles River Room in the middle of the day at noon. It's a very comfortable place to meet. You know, it's a great big room. It feels very safe. We could wear masks if anybody in our little group wanted to, but we didn't at our meeting. So the next thing we're going to update on the number one on the MBTA guidelines. And then we're going to talk about, I briefly mentioned earlier in our meeting, the Hunting Road, the proposed rezoning that was before our town meeting, our annual town meeting a year ago, that was referred back to the planning board for further study. And what that was is there's a whole strip of land near Kendrick Street, fronting on Hunting Road, between Hunting Road and the Mass Pike, that for historic reasons is zoned for acre. It's all in the acre zone. There are 23 lots in that strip, and they're mostly smaller than an acre because they were built, you know, before the zoning. But you know, an owner of a couple of parcels of land on one end of the strip petitioned for this article, and people didn't feel comfortable about it and wanted to refer it to the planning board rather than voting on it. So we're going to study that. And then we'll talk about the results of the survey that we talked about at our meeting tonight. And then by the time we meet at our next meeting, we will have had this meeting, and we'll talk about, you know, this meeting. And then we also want to talk about accessory dwelling units. And that has particularly come up, I think, because our rival town, Wellesley, has at town meeting by a wide majority approved accessory dwelling units bylaw. Now, we were ahead of them in having an accessory dwelling unit bylaw, but ours is very restrictive and Wellesley's is more generous. And so we definitely want to take a look at that and think about what and when we will want to put that before our Needham town meeting again. And then I also added group homes and other housing options for disabled adults, because I want to make sure we understand that, because it's been mentioned very frequently by people who have attended our forums. So that's what we're doing in the zoning subgroup. Any additions, Oscar?
No, I think you covered it. I will say just one thing. If anybody's interested, the CHAPA, the Citizens Housing and Planning Association, sent comments to about the bylaw, about the community, MBTA communities. And there was one comment that stuck out that was very interesting. And I don't know how many people were at the select board meeting when it was presented to the select board, the MBTA law was presented. And the discussion was around when we add up all of the multifamily housing that we have to count towards the X number of units that we would have to, you know, show that could be produced, that we're looking at a smaller number potentially. And so what the CHAPA comment is that they don't want you to be able to count the multifamily you already have. They want you to count new housing. And so that's an interesting comment. And who's to say that's going to get drafted into the law? But that's CHAPA's one of the points that they made. Anyway, it's an interesting read, and I'm happy to send the link to the CHAPA comments if anybody would like them. I could just send them to this group.
Yeah, I've looked at that too, and I think we definitely should get that out. But another thing to be gotten out are the comments by the Massachusetts Municipal Association, and that is, cities and towns all over well, I mean, particularly focused on the people in this region in the MBTA communities, but in Mass Municipal Associations all over the state, and the Mass Municipal Legal Association, and that's municipal lawyers. And I thought that their comments were excellent, and go very much to the concerns that Needham has about ambiguities in the law. And I also want to make sure I get a copy of the letter that was sent by our town to DHCD commenting on the guidelines. Because I think two big issues are, we're a commuter rail community, and they say we're a bus community. No. And also the timeline. They're not respecting the amount of time it takes in communities with a town meeting form of government to achieve changes. And we really need, that really needs to be changed. So that's where we are on the
That's a
zoning
good point,
subgroup.
Jean. It's the amount of time it takes to make change here because of the way that we're being governed. So how do we capitalize on some opportunities that have timelines that we may not be able to meet? So that's something that we should discuss about how do we proceed with things so we don't miss opportunities. I just wanted to let Michael know that in the middle of our Zoom outage, when he got back, I just said that we were planning on meeting by the end of the month and that we have a list of things we're going to look at to tackle. So I just didn't want to exclude you from.
Sure, no, thank you. Sounds great.
And so the last group is the Housing Development and Preservation, and that's Helen and Rhonda, Emily, and Ed. So I don't know if someone from the group wants to report back.
I'm happy to jump in, but Emily and Ed, feel free to jump in if you prefer. Emily, you want to go? I'll go. It doesn't matter. So Rhonda put together a nice summary. The four of us in our group met. So Rhonda's the fourth member, and we met a week ago on Tuesday, so Tuesday the 5th, and we basically discussed. We got to a point of 4 priorities that we're going to really divide and conquer. So number 1 is supporting the Needham Housing Authority. So one of us will look into what the NHA is doing, where they are with their work, how the plan should support their efforts. And included in that conversation is trying to learn more about the Militia Heights property. Then number 2 is taking a look at the impact of tear downs and whether the plan should support any changes. And then number 3 is looking at available public and private parcels to assess for development potential. And that includes Stephen Palmer. And then number 4 is reviewing models for meeting the needs of those with disabilities and seniors. And we also talked about the concept of trying to get a little more insight into what would draw developers to want to develop in town, because we can think about everything that we think is needed, but unless folks want to develop here, what's going to incentivize them? So that's another
They need
piece.
density. From what I've talked to a couple of developers, they need density, because what happens is, in order to create affordable housing, they have to create market housing as well, to create a pro forma to be able to even do it. So that's the key, is to give flexibility to be able to do both, I think, from the private development side. I don't know, Oscar, you do a lot more housing than I do, but it feels like we need to make it so that there's flexibility that can be reviewed, but that allows for people to be able to have to sustain themselves with the developments that they're doing.
It does come down to where are the opportunities for the scale to actually happen. That's the challenge, because a lot of
Right.
these smaller sites that have to be assembled to put something together it makes the math harder if they're small. Or
And-
even
and
not-
fewer,
not
and fewer
working.
units, so then it doesn't help as much. So
So
I
that's
think,
where you have to look at parking and all the other kinds of things that could, basically take some of the pressure off.
So
yeah,
our group will reconvene in another 2 weeks on Tuesday, the 26th.
great. So I think the next thing, so I think we're for all of these meetings, we'll just kind of until we meet the end of May deadline, we'll just give updates on work and see where there are some overlaps and information that we can share. But I think Lee, you were gonna kind of talk about next steps and for the
I
next.
think-
meeting.
I want
I
to
think-
mention one thing. I'm sorry, Lee.
Go ahead.
Before we move on, as you may have noticed when you read the minutes of our meeting of March 10th, we talked about a steering committee. I know our member Dan Matthews was very interested in the idea that we should have a steering committee. But we never actually made a decision to have a steering committee. Instead, what we've gone forward with is these 3 working groups. And, as is typical with town committees, in advance of a meeting like this one, and like all our prior meetings, our staff, Lee Newman, Alex Klee, Karen Sooner-Borg, and sometimes Cindy Gonzalez, meet with the co-chairs, me and Natasha, and we plan the agenda for the meeting and talk about, our subsequent meetings. I just want to make sure that everybody is okay with the idea that we don't need a steering committee. It will just add to the complexity of the management of this process. And I welcome your response to that. I just didn't want to let that go. I want to make sure we're comfortable with that. So if we're okay with that, I just wanted to mention it. And
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
okay, so Lee, Lee's,
I'm a little concerned that we lost a bunch of people before, right? There's a few people who did not rejoin.
There's a
who are-
recording and we're gonna send this to them as well.
Okay,
that they
so
can
I
make
guess
comments.
I would like to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to weigh in if possible.
Mhm.
maybe we should send out a follow-up email on that particular issue, Emily, and just make sure our members, we do have a
also-
quorum here. We do have a quorum here, so we can.
Yeah,
kind
we
of-
can also send a link to the recording, to the second recording, so that people don't feel like they need to, if they were here for the first part. And so that
Yeah,
they can.
it just seems there was a technical glitch and, we lost
Mhm.
4
Mhm.
people.
Yes,
Okay, but, so I guess what I do is we continued meeting, the 6 of us, and the consensus was don't need to establish a steering committee, but because of the technical glitch, we wanted to make sure that you were aware of this and have an opportunity to comment. Okay, so Lee, then, a very important category here, next steps.
Okay, I think Alex, when she sent an email out to the group, kind of laid out an outline of what the picture I think looks like, moving from May all the way through October. So let me just kind of go through what we thought the agenda would look like for the next 6 months, and what we're planning on taking up. So we talked a little bit about May, and we anticipate, having the results of the survey available at that time, and then structuring a time for this group to talk about what its overall aspirational goals are, to see if we can reach consensus on that. Additionally, Karen Sooner-Borg, who put together the housing needs assessment, I don't know if you remember, at the time when all the data was put into that, the 2020 census data was not available. It is now available, and so she anticipates that she's going to be updating that report to now incorporate the 2020 data. So that will also be available at the meeting in May. At the June meeting, we thought we would invite, if he's available, Red Foster from the Housing Authority to kind of give an overview of what the Housing Authority's overall plan is, to kind of, so to assist you in identifying ways where this group can be supportive of those goals in an effort to advance them. So we were going to invite him in, see if he could do a presentation on what their overall vision is, and give this group an opportunity to have direct contact with him. And then we also thought we would have, of course, the subcommittee reports on your recommendations for the work that you've been conducting the last couple of months. For July, we wanted to focus on, we're hoping, or we'll be able to focus on the MBTA guidelines that they'll be out. So we'll understand what the rules are and a presentation on that. So this group can think about how it wants to integrate its recommendations with those overall draft strategies that come out of the MBTA communities. And also I think for this group to begin to put together its strategic action items, what its strategic action items are to address the overall policy goals that you've developed. And then in August, I think we hope to have a preliminary draft housing plan available for review and preparation for a presentation of that plan to the community in September, to see, did we get it right? I mean, did we identify the overall arching goals? Have we come up with strategies that address what people's consensus points are? And then in October, I think the work to come back to reconvene after we've had that community meeting to make any adjustments to the plan that we feel that are warranted and to close out the work of this group.
Lee, do you have this? I was just looking at the packet. Is this in writing somewhere or somewhere that you could share in writing? There was just a lot of information. I didn't see it in the packet.
It wasn't in the packet, and I regret that we didn't put it in the packet, but it was emailed to everyone in the group on April 8th.
But
Like,
sure,
okay.
An email from Alex Klee.
we'll
Okay, I'll
put
look
it,
for it.
we'll put it online so that it's available.
Thank you.
No, I don't know why I had in my head from the beginning, and I've probably repeated this, and that there'd be another community meeting in June, but there is not going to be another community meeting in June. That event will be in September when we present the draft plan.
Okay, so I move to close this meeting and to make sure that we send everyone the 2 recordings in case for those who missed the first one and then for those who were not able to join for the second one. And
Just a note on the recordings, IT already posted the recordings this week. You can't do it tomorrow, usually does it Friday. So it's probably gonna be next Friday.
They only do it every Friday? Oh,
Mhm.
that's too bad.
yeah,
Why won't it be tomorrow, Alex?
I don't know. He did it today. He can't do it tomorrow. I don't know.
I see. He
So
did
he-
it Thursday this
Oh,
week.
so- but he hasn't,
Holiday
he didn't do
weekend,
the one,
probably.
he didn't do the one, the 7 o'clock when we started at 7 o'clock, the first part, right? He'll do both at the same time?
Yeah. Mhm.
Oh, okay,
Yeah, he
okay.
uploads all the town meetings to YouTube once per week.
Okay, well, we'll let everyone know in an email.
Yeah.
Okay,
So, do we have a motion to adjourn?
so moved.
And a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Who seconded?
Michael O'Brien.
Oh, good.
I just want to thank everyone for being so thoughtful about this. This is a really important piece for the town, and it's great to have so much interest and kind of thought leadership in it. So I just wanted to thank everyone for all of their time that they've taken to do this.
And we look forward to having you as a full member of the committee, Heidi. The housing, the group, the working group, I should say. Yeah. All right. So a vote. So I'll call the vote. Natasha,
Aye.
Helen,
Yes,
Gregory,
yes.
Oscar Mertz,
Yes.
Ed Cosgrove,
Yes.
Michael O'Brien,
Yes.
Emily Cooper.
Yes.
All right, we stand adjourned. Thank you. Good evening.
Thank you, everyone.